Iguazu's story is a very human one of envy, humiliation, and payback. While unearthing the true story of this Red Gun mercenary requires you to achieve all endings, it will finally explain why he is the final fight of the true ending. To understand this mercenary, we should start at the beginning. Iguazu was a gambler, potentially even a compulsive gambler as his arena logs and chatter would suggest. One day he bet big and lost. To pay back his debtors, Iguazu was forced to undergo 4th generation augmentation surgery. Whether this was the reason he joined as Gun 5 of the Red Guns, Balim's AC squad, or whether he was part of the group before, it is unclear. However, there is strong reason to believe he joined after his augmentation surgery, as typically numbered and elite mercenaries of AC squads are augmented humans. While the purpose of these augmentations are not fully defined, I imagine it is the nature of the surgery using coral that makes these mercenaries more compatible with their ACs and more useful as they can see the coral. This point is important later. Within the ranks of the Red Guns, Iguazu quickly makes a friend, Gun 4 Volta, his partner in crime. But life is not perfect for Gun 5 and Gun 4 living under Drill Sergeant Gun 1 Michigan.
Attack! Get in there, you maggots!
It is under Michigan's care that Gun 4 and Gun 5 find themselves enduring punchings and constant strings of verbal insults. Iguazu feels frustrated with his treatment and has one goal: to punch the daylights out of Michigan. We witness his frustration when we fight Iguazu in an alternate mission of Attack the Dam Complex.
I'm not taking any more of your shit.
He tells us how he doesn't need this treatment from us too, as he experiences it on the regular from Michigan. One can even speculate that the hero of Jupiter that he picked a fight with referenced in his arena log could be none other than Michigan himself. Michigan doesn't hold back. In fact, the retaliation is described to be as furious, and having changed Iguazu forever. This doesn't quell Iguazu. In fact, he remains as uncooperative, argumentative, and resentful as ever.
Gun 5, you just volunteered yourself for the front line.
Volta tries to temper him, we learn through an archive we find. An archive that details Volta's demise, his final words addressed to Iguazu. He uses his last moments to convince Iguazu that Michigan isn't all that bad compared to the suits at the corporation, that they're still family despite being an abusive one. Volta encourages them instead to take out his anger on the freaks who sent them on a suicide mission. It is uncertain who the freaks are in this scenario, as Volta and Iguazu have referred to us as a freak before, but it is possible this may be directed at the suits at headquarters. Iguazu was AWOL during this mission, and absent for his friend's final moments. But it might be the loss of Volta that begins to feed the volatile fire that is Iguazus Rage. It's safe to say that Iguazu is a very hurt person.
This is why I hate freelancers.
So when he hears of our rise to fame as a freelancer and as the Wallclimber, he must dig deep into his wounds.
I heard about you climbing the wall. Don't you think you're hot shit now?
Our successes fuel his frustration.
Pathetic.
When we fight the Ice Worm, Michigan also praises V4 Rusty for being reliable and asks him to join the Red Guns. I imagine it's not often Michigan dishes out praise for his mercs, so it must really hurt Iguazu to hear him give it so freely to the opposition on the regular. As Balim loses power on Rubicon and becomes desperate, Iguazu's frustration deepens as he finds himself on the front lines.
That AC, it's Headbringer.
We encounter him later in the depths and he's ready to prove himself and restore his pride.
Let me tell you, I'm sick and tired of this pit.
In this exchange, we see him begin to direct his frustration at us.
I know you're laughing at me. What makes you so special, freelancer?
He is not only struggling with the idea of losing to us, chalking it up to luck, but he begins to think that the humiliation is intentional, that he is the butt of a joke. While I've seen many who are quick to call him emotionally unstable, I see Iguazu as nothing but a human who has come to doubt himself in the line of failure and damaged further by abuse at the hands of the Red Guns. Every defeat must leave an unforgettable taste in his mouth, and thus begins his descent fueled by humiliation, envy, and rage, helplessly blinded by it. His demise is furthered by the internal struggle within, the ringing in his ears he frequently experiences.
My ears. Not now.
We hear him in constant agony in missions, crippled by the intensity of the ringing, begging for it to stop.
Make it stop. Make it. It's inside my head.
At first, Iguazu is confused and believes the surgeon who worked on him must have messed him up, but it is not long before Iguazu senses a pattern and begins to realize the ringing only occurs around us. Just like everything else, Iguazu believes we are to blame.
Freelancer, you're doing this, aren't you?
Constantly trying to sabotage his existence. The cause of his ringing remains a mystery, dismissed by all around him, including us. However, if left to his own devices, Iguazu deserts the Red Guns, as heard by Balaam chatter.
Iguazu? Oh yeah, the deserter who pissed his pants and ran.
It is not until the final ending does the full storyline of Iguazu come into play. In Alea Iacta Est, we see Iguazu takes matter into his own hands. Here we encounter Iguazu in alternate missions, taking requests from other factions and remaining in action to gain a few extra credits. Iguazu finds it a fitting opportunity to defeat us, a 2-for-1 you could say. He tries to take us down himself, when unsurprisingly fails.
I would have had you! Don't you dare think you've won!
He grows desperate, and his desire to beat us becomes even stronger than his desire to punch out the daylights of Michigan. He resorts to hiring an assassin by the name of Cold Call, wherein we learn just how hard Iguazu is taking defeat.
Why he abandoned his red gun pride and succumbed to his frustrations.
It is Cold Call's wishes to deliver our body to Iguazu, but also fails. We can imagine at this point Iguazu will do anything to win, so it is not a stretch to say that when Allmind knocks on his door, he is all but willing to take its help in return for information and strength.
There you are, just like they said.
I like to think Iguazu is the perfect candidate for Allmind to prey on, susceptible and blinded by rage.
Kill the both of you!
He is but a pawn and a contingency plan for Allmind. Iguazu follows through with Allmind's plan, unbeknownst to us. It is on the platform of the final moments do we face the least expected. As a player in the shoes of Raven, Iguazu is nothing but an afterthought, an easily riled up opponent who can't handle defeat. I suspect, much like myself, no one anticipated him to be the final threat.
Well. I've been waiting for this freelancer.
It is only once you face Iguazu in this final mission you begin to understand his heart. The pieces begin to fall into place, the pain he has endured at the hands of others, and you.
I don't care about the big plan. I just want that damn freelancer dead.
The anger, the frustration is so palpable. And finally, the last mystery is answered, the ringing. The ringing he heard in his head were no other than voices of Coral.
That damn noise. It was you all along. I'll kill you and the freelancer.
He could hear air every time you encountered him. But something seems different with Iguazu. Wrong, perhaps. He didn't establish contact much like we did with air. It wasn't so apparent to him. Instead, the voices were overbearing for him, perhaps horrifying, maddening, or perhaps he was overtuned, much like a telepath coming into powers without knowing how to filter them. Iguazu's emotions overwhelm him in this moment.
Shut up! I'll shut you all up!
Iguazu, what are you?
And in turn, he overpowers Allmind's control.
They're gone. The ringing, the stupid voices.
And dispels air from the area.
It's all clear now. I feel good.
Relief floods his body. As for the first time, he feels in control of himself. It's just you and him. But even in this battle for his pride, empowered by Allmind's technology,
I know how this goes. This is where that grit of yours kicks in.
he is not enough. He loses for the final time.
I always envied you. The freelancer who had it all.
You were a mistake, Iguazu.
It is this moment that makes Iguazu so incredibly human, who all but understands the feeling of failure. This is the most tragic story of Armored Core 6. A man who only knew suffering and had lost everything.